pleased to be joined by Jason Gregor of the DFO Rundown, my co-host on the podcast, for some trade deadline countdown talk. As I mentioned, we're focusing on the Edmonton Oilers today with our trade deadline playbook on dailyfaceoff.com for this edition of the All 32, which is delivered by our friends at Montana's. Jason, the Oilers are holding their pro scouting meetings as we speak in Vegas this week. And I think everyone's curious to know what direction the Oilers are going to go in after this. And I ask you, and it makes it so interesting because I believe that the Oilers themselves do not know the answer to this question as to what exactly is their top priority. So what is it in your mind? Is it getting a strong defender to add to the mix and maybe take a little bit of heat off of someone like Darnell Nurse? Or is it maybe up front and adding a forward that can win you faceoffs, kill penalties, maybe be someone that can supplement your team at special teams? Where do you land?
Well, I think their number one priority still, even though, since Christmas, they're fourth best in goals against. As a team, they've really improved. That was the area they had to improve. But I still think it's a defender. Bouchard and Broberg have been really good as a pair, but they played very sheltered minutes. They played legit third pair minutes, which is fine. I think in an ideal world that they would add another defenseman, but I don't know if it's to the point of the asking price. Like, Florida overpaid for Ben Sherratt. I don't think anyone debates that. And if that's the set line in the sand, I don't think Edmonton jumps in on it. I've been reading, Frank, and talking to other guys in regards to your reports on, Gavrikov and others. And they're good players, but I don't think the style of player that Edmonton needs is just a solid defender. But to find a solid defender who's also a really good puck mover, well, that's hard, right? Gavrikov's a really good defender, but he's not a great puck mover. And in today's NHL, you kind of need both. So the asking price, I think, might be too high for Edmonton. It's a risk because, you're in the window of McDavid and Draisaitl. You could argue to be in that window for 10 years if you re-sign them. So, it's a rush, but it's not like an urgent rush, I don't think. So I still think it's a defender, and then they need a right shot forward who can take some faceoffs. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a full-time centerman, but a right shot who's at least a decent centerman. I think that's what they could use defensively, maybe on the penalty kill, but also at key draws in the defensive zone.
Yeah, and so, if the Oilers are going to go out and trade for defensemen, there's plenty available, it seems like, leading up to the market, but maybe not that many that are that exciting. So, Jason, do you see somebody who might be a close stylistic fit for them? Some of the things you just mentioned, all that going into it. Do they need a big defender? Do they need somebody who can move the puck? What do you think on this?
Well, I think they need a combination of both, which is hard to find, right? Like you mentioned take some minutes off of Darnell Nurse. Well, Darnell Nurse last year down the stretch was unreal for Edmonton when he basically didn't play on the power play, and they said, you're going to play all the tough minutes. He played 50% of his ice time against elite forwards from puckiq.com. And he was excellent at it. He only was on the ice for 3 goals against. So I think Nurse has shown he can be that guy if people don't expect him to put up huge offensive numbers because he never is on the power play. But can Brett Kulak do it consistently? I thought him and Barry were really good last year in the playoffs. They didn't really have a second pair. They kind of had a second and a third. They basically split the minutes between Bouchard and Keith, and then Kulak and Barry. And the problem is they haven't replaced Duncan Keith. He has all the experience, and Broberg's a really good defenseman who I think is going to be good, but can he be Duncan Keith good in the postseason? That's a pretty big ask. So I think a veteran player who just calms it down, just makes steady plays, doesn't have to be flashy, but he has to be able to move the puck, because in today's NHL, like the Oilers in transition are one of the most dangerous teams in the league. All the defenseman has to do is get the puck to the forwards, and then they can make them pay.
So, Jason, I think one thing the Oilers have to be concerned about here, whatever move they make, there's likely going to be a trickle-down effect or a ripple effect in their lineup, specifically with regards to some young players. If you're trading for someone, what up front, what does that do, and how does it impact Dylan Holloway, for instance? On the back end, what does that do in terms of disrupting whatever growth we've seen from Broberg? And so as the Oilers have found their footing here this season and have played much better of late, does the play from these guys sort of give you any pause as to the necessary need to go out and make an addition?
Well, right now, if I look at the guy who would be impacted by the right shot. I don't think it's Holloway, to be honest. I think it would be Derek Reiner, yes, a Puljujarvi. So, I think Holloway, he's continued to get better in basically essentially fourth line minutes, although Edmonton runs 11 forward. So lately, while he's not playing a lot of minutes, he is playing with the top 6 forwards in those minutes, because whether it's Draisaitl, Hyman, Nugent Hopkins, or McDavid, they rotate down and get to play with Holloway, and that's really helped them. So, and that's the other thing for Edmonton. If they opt to go with 11-7 guys, then you don't even have to necessarily impact Broberg. Maybe he plays less minutes, but he still gets playing time. And I think that's going to be the interesting one for the Oilers, is they can say, well, we can go 11-7 and we add that veteran. And yeah, Broberg still gets some playoff experience, but he just gets sheltered playoff experience, right? Because right now they brought in Vinny DeHarnay. Now he's 26, but he's a rookie in the NHL, and he's been a great success story. And I think he'll be someone that they want next year. But if you had to have him sit in the press box in the playoffs, or even Broberg for the odd game, but they get some experience, I think that would be the ideal situation. But I don't think it's going to impact Holloway, guys, because I think it's a right shot. And that's going to be either Puljujarvi or Ryan who are impacted.
Yeah, and if you're trading for someone cap-wise, you're probably going to need to move out someone like Puljujarvi in order to make it happen anyway. So no real impact there. Thanks to Jason Gregor for joining us today for this week's edition of the All 32 as we continue our trade deadline countdown season. You can listen to Jason and me on the DFO Rundown. We chop it up every Monday and Friday wherever you get your podcasts. And this week's All 32 has been delivered by our friends at Montana's. Montana's is bringing back the viewing party this year with their lineup of daily deals. Today's Tuesday. That means $5 tacos. Head over to montanas.ca for the full lineup and to check out their delicious new comfort menu. Thanks, Jason.
Anytime, boys.